I'd like to ask you to help me in welcoming Rhonda.
I've added a co-presenter, and you can see Elizabeth here. Elizabeth Anderson is a colleague of mine from Northern Illinois University, and she was teaching today in her real world, which is at the College of DeKalb. So the two of us will be presenting, and I, of course, get to control the whole thing. So she'll be trying to get your attention to say she needs to say something while I'm plowing through it, so I'll apologize ahead of time. But let me tell you a little bit about who we are. I've been teaching at Northern Illinois University for a quarter of a century or so, and I have taught visual literacy all those years. It's been part of my heart forever. My dissertation a number of years ago was on how well 8th graders in language arts classes can understand a visual message from a movie with no words. And so from there, I went right on into all the other media and thought about how can we help people become more visually literate. So I've been dedicated to that, along with many other things that, as a professor in educational technology. And what I'd like you to know is our presentation today is going to show you how we teach visual literacy to teachers. But what you're going to see is all the activities that we do, some of the ways that we present this, and get a sense of our philosophy and feeling about the class that we teach. We could do this as a workshop, we could do it as a one-day course, we've done it as a one-credit, come and learn a little bit and go home and practice it and send it back. Our course currently is virtual, so I still teach at Northern, but now instead of meeting with nice people like yourselves, I'm mostly on the computer, all right? So that's how we got to this point to come and talk with you today. Elizabeth, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, everyone. I'm a writing teacher at a community college, but I'm also working on a doctorate in instructional technology. That's how I met Rhonda back in 2009. I was a new doc student, and I took her visual literacy course, and I said, oh my gosh, this just completely relates to what I do for a living. I am interested in digital rhetoric and gaming and the language and writing that's involved in those online environments. So it's been a real pleasure to work with Rhonda and learn so much from her.
We learn a lot from each other. Elizabeth is, in the 21st century, way better than I am. So a lot of the things that you see today, like the platform we're using today, is her finding completely in her creation. She keeps me up on the tools pretty well, I must say. Not too competent, but anyway. So I've handed out paper and said you could use your digital device. One of the first nights of class, in fact, oftentimes in class on the first night, if we are not virtual, I ask students to think about themselves, their own characteristics. Because of course, when you're teaching a 15-week class, you ask people to get to know each other and they stand up and introduce themselves, right? Well, instead of doing that, we started doing what we call the visual quilt. And we asked each person to take a piece of paper and physically create something that indicates something about themselves. Something about their characteristics, their profession, their life, their name, anything they want to. And then we would put them up literally on the wall in the classroom and create a quilt of these squares of paper. So I gave you a piece of paper and suggested that you might be able to do that. The directions for it were about that complicated. We were very open-ended, and so you can imagine that we got everything from collages of clip art that people could quickly do in the classroom. We were always in labs with computers, and print out and put on the wall, to people bringing in almost three-dimensional objects and saying, this represents me. I would let them know ahead of time we were going to do this on. So that's what this is to get you the sense that we get people immersed immediately, trying to help them improve their skills in thinking and creating visually. And for most of our teachers that I've worked with over all these years, that isn't as comfortable to them as working in words. So when Elizabeth and I both say, well, we have literacy backgrounds, she teaches writing, I taught language arts. I have a master's in English and literature, and I'm a real reader. But many of our students are library media specialists. They work in libraries. Some of our students are in museum studies because our course is an option, actually it's almost required for the students getting a master's in museum studies at Northern. So we have this wide range of educators in the class who may or may not be terribly visual themselves. And one of my favorite quotes from a student as we get started on visual literacy, and she knows she's supposed to be in the room, she says, but this isn't about art, is it? And see, you go, well, yeah, of course it is, it's going to be, and I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable, but you're going to learn to get past that. So we approach this with this very open attitude of no matter how skilled you are with technology, no matter how ready you are to look at art or photography or film or any other visual advertising, we're going to help you get there. And we're going to help you develop your visual literacy. But our ultimate goal is to help you as an educator develop the visual literacy of those with whom you work. So we want to push you beyond, okay, now I understand what visual literacy is, all the way to I'm more visually literate and I can guide others to become that way as well. So that's the premise that I've always started with. All right? And Elizabeth has been co-teaching this class with me for the last 3 years and has had a lot to do with some of the changes that we've made. She did a little study on the class one semester and then the next semester improved it about 100%. So here's about us, and what we included on this is the fact that we have a forthcoming book chapter in a text that's being promoted now but will be released in the spring. And our chapter was called Teaching Visual Literacy, Pedagogy, Design, Implementation, Tools, and Techniques. And it's about the class we're talking with you about today. So fairly soon you'll have a long, beautiful article if you want to see that. We also have several workshops that we've done, and we have links here to workshop handouts that we can provide you and that kind of thing. So you can be aware that we have many resources for you. All right, just a quick setup. I bet you this is very familiar to all of you. We have multiple literacies in our world today that are taking on more and more equal importance. Schools used to be based primarily in verbal literacy. You had to be able to speak, present, write, and read. And we know that today that's not enough, that all of these other literacies have taken a place. And there's a lot of concern about the definitions being used, how are they assessed, what do we mean, how well do you have to be literate in each of these compared to real literacy, you know, the other literacies. So we look at this and say, well, all of these are important, and we want to concentrate on maybe a combination of technology, digital literacy, visual literacy, information literacy is important to all of us, as well as media literacy, which kind of flows over to visual literacy. So we start with this with teachers to say, this is where the world is today.
And also when we started revising the course, we reviewed the literature on visual literacy and noticed that there's been this big shift towards these multi-literacies, and that it isn't so much a sense of, well, here, learn how to decode a picture, but there's this new term called fluency, in addition to literacy, and an educator in the 21st century needs to be fluent in all of these areas in order to be effective with visual literacy. The other layer of our research problem, when we went about studying our study and the case study, was that we noticed there's a gap between what students actually can do and what the educators expect them to be able to do. And so, there was that whole myth of the net generation and the digital natives, but what we find is that, well, perhaps they're very good at texting their friends. If we sit them down before some mapping software, they have no clue what to do and they're lost. And so we thought for the people that we're working with, we need to teach them how to teach and be comfortable with exploring and problem solving in any technology. And that learning to use the technology itself is indeed visual literacy, because you're looking at an interface or a menu, and you have to figure it out in order to help your students.
Okay, anybody heard it? Good. All right, so one of the ways we want to start with teachers is to say that there are basic concepts that they should be aware of and be able to work with. And very often for teachers, we also want to mention there are standards that we need to meet as professionals. And depending on what area of profession you're in, these are standards that you either are familiar with already or are going to become familiar with. So we spend the first few weeks just looking at what is visual literacy, what's the definition of these literacies, how do they play out in society, and what are the standards in professional education that relate to them. So just for an example, the visual literacy site from the IVLA, one of the reasons we're all here, is very interesting, because the original definition that was created by John Debs back in the 60s is a long, complicated, convoluted definition. But if I say to you, find a definition of visual literacy. You can go on, 8,000 sites right this minute with your little tool and discover that there are conflicting several definitions that are well thought of and are held to be correct by the organization or the author or the scholar that has created them. So we spend a good week talking about what are the many definitions of visual literacy, why aren't there so many, why are we having problems with this, what positions do these authors or these scholars come from, what do they include, what's the difference between visual literacy and media literacy, all of those kinds of things. So we don't lay out at one definition and say, here it is, this is what it means, no one else is right, we're right. We have a discussion about it and say, these are the things we're concerned about, these are the things the field has trouble moving forward because not everybody agrees on what we mean by it, all right? So you already get us into problem solving and critical thinking. And if you're working with professionals, we have students who are working with, they're teaching trainers, they're teaching teachers, they're teachers themselves, they're in the library, et cetera. So which definition of visual literacy can you resonate with is what we actually end up with. Maria Afgharianu, one of the scholars in IVLA, has said there are many definitions of the term, and she says each literist has produced his or her own definition. And if you look me up, one of the definitions I did in a very early article that was published in a media and library journal was saying it's the ability to understand visual communication. Forget encoding, I just didn't even mention it. Now I look at that and I'm embarrassed. It's like, no, you have to be able to create them too. You can't just learn how to read them. So it's interesting to us that we run into these problems with, definitional issues, but it's very interesting. Another thing that we bring up, and I'm sure these are familiar to you, are the P21 Framework. So the P21 group has looked at academic subjects and all the things that are essential in the 21st century, and they think about learning and innovative skills. They look at the core subjects, life and career skills, but they also include information, media, and technology skills, and visual literacy is embedded there. So along all the environments, professional development for teachers, the study of curriculum and instruction, and all the standards and assessments that accompany those standards, all of them should be built around this framework of all of these 21st century literacies. And we put it that way, very often teachers calm down about how important it is and also how essential it will be for them to continue learning about it. One of the groups that we've recently been referring to is this Association of College and Research Libraries. The librarians in this group have established visual literacy competency standards for higher education, and you can go to the site and take a look at what they are. They have performance standards for students, and they talk about the understanding of an image, how to create images, how to read images, how to look at images within the culture, what they mean, how they might be persuasive, all of those things. It's very similar to standards from the National Council for Teachers of English or the IVLA standards, or even the standards we'll see in Common Core. These are things that we have now finally, I've been working, as I said, with this for 25 years, we finally have positive examples of professional education associations saying, no, you have to do this. This is important to the learners that we're going to move on into the next decade and the decade after that. You can't ignore this. You can't say, I need to do math and science. I need to teach reading. Yep, you do. All of those are essential. You're tested on those things. Your job may depend on it. But for all of us, and for the sake of our next generation of students, we need to have all of the rest of this embedded in. So what our perspective is to say, we have to figure out ways for you to embed this, integrated is my word, into what you're doing in social studies, what you're doing in language arts, what you can add to a lesson that you always teach in the Civil War or on a particular short story. So you're not doing, oh, I have to add units on visual literacy, how will I ever do that at any time, No, you have to think about this as part of what you do in everything you do. And, oddly enough, the first thing I was ever asked to do after I got my doctorate was from a woman that I worked with from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, who said she was charged by her government with altering the curriculum guide for language arts and English for grades 7 through 12. And she said, it's, reading and writing and speaking, and they want to add viewing. This was more than 25 years ago. They made it a requirement that all teachers teaching language arts added viewing and imagery to what they were doing. So I feel like the US is behind Canada and England and Australia, who embedded this into their curriculum requirements many years before we had. So we're right there. Some of you worked with the Common Core, I don't know, maybe not, maybe so. There's a lot of controversy about Common Core standards. But they, people are laughing, there's a lot of controversy. But they have Common Core standards that involve visual literacy pretty essentially. And you can go to a site like Edutopia and find easy ways to link visual literacy standards in the Common Core to your own curricular practices at every grade level. And if you go to any, I hate to say Amazon because I'm kind of in trouble with them, but if you go to a site like Amazon and look for books on visual literacy, especially for teaching visual literacy in the classroom, you'll find lots of them tied to the Common Core standards, but with activities, with ways to put it in your curriculum. Here's what you can do if you teach 4th grade and you're looking at math units. What can you do with visual literacy in 4th grade math? Here's a bunch of worksheets. Here's a bunch of ideas. Here's a bunch of materials. And of course, the web is a plethora of resources for stuff like that. So these are the things that we do to say to our teachers and to educators with whom we work in the public schools, this is why this is important. And we don't need to say it. They're convinced. Elizabeth and I and another student did a project for 2 years in a school, and we went to ask permission to try something out and research it. And the principal said, wait, it involves art and visual literacy and the computer. I don't care what it is, get in here. Just we need you. Because he felt he was underdeveloped in all 3 areas. And so he had heard about visual literacy. And as a principal in a rural school district, we thought that was pretty awesome. We have a lot of readings in our classes that we change regularly, and we embed them in a Blackboard signing protected place so that they're available to the students. But we also have 2 books that we are recommending for this semester, and we change it each semesters. The design book by Robin Williams, a lot of you have seen her, she's been in publication for a long time. And then a book called Literacy is Not Enough. Is that right? And we gave it to them because it looks forward to, okay, these are some good ideas, you're going to be studying them in our class. The book says, okay, now what? After you've gotten beginning status, after you've gotten past the first course you've taken, what else do you need to think about to really integrate these things into the way you educate? So that's that class. And then this is just a frontispiece of our course layout. So our course, I'm going to go back to it as soon as I can see it. Our course is based on an expedition. We call it a journey. And so we use Blackboard as our course management system. All of our materials are based on this idea of you're taking a trip, you're on a journey, and you're running into trouble, or you're having to get tools, or whatever. So it's a visual metaphor, and it makes it easier for us to use visuals to guide students along as they go and so forth. So I'll show you some of that as we go along. Am I forgetting anything so far?
No.
No.
All right.
All right, let's gotta move along. I'm gonna get a 5-minute one before I know it. Okay. So as we started to teach this class, and I've been teaching it a long time, a lot of different things have occurred, but one of them is that we feel that teaching about something isn't as helpful as teaching about it and making you do it. So just about every week, we teach about a topic. They've got readings that they've had to do before they come to class. Maybe they've had to look at a website or watch a movie or whatever it might be. But then, whether the class is virtual or synchronously online or even face-to-face, there's often an activity that we lead them through to follow up on what they've been reading and studying. So we can say, now you understand it, now let's see you do it. And so in order to do that, we've created a series of activities, every week at least one, sometimes 2, that help students practice what we're helping them learn, okay? This is one of the first assignments. One of the basics of visual literacy is understanding that basic visual vocabulary, the design elements and principles that we've all worked with, that we've talked it all about visuals. And after we've talked with them about that, and they've read about it in a couple different readings that have been assigned, we say we'd like them to do something with that to help each other learn them more effectively. So we ask them to choose 5 of the terms, something like perspective, point of view, close-up, rule of thirds, all of those terms that we've used as design elements and principles, and to demonstrate them visually. And so they set out to do that. And I have an example. So we
If you
created.
click the dog, those are some from this year, but then there's also a link to the visual dictionary, so you can show both.
Okay, I'm just watching our time, we probably can't. But this is the kind of thing students would then create. So they give the definition of the term, I'm in your way, I'm sorry.
All right.
I'll do one place at a time. They give the definition of the term as they understand it and then try to visually create it as well. So, you get the idea. So we've just made them work with it, and then they post these in a Weebly site, which is a tool that makes web pages that are free, and we collect them all together. So then they have this huge visual dictionary. We add to it every year of how other people think this term means, because sometimes we think it's really clear what the term means, but we discovered that they don't think so. So that's the kind of an assignment that we give very early on, after one of the first weeks of the semester. Okay, do you want to talk about this one, Elizabeth? Molly Bang, this is Molly Bang. Are you familiar with Molly Bang's work? Okay, she has a lovely book out called Picture This, How Pictures That Work. And one of the things she has in it is completely graphic visual depiction, page by page, page by page, page by page, of a very familiar story you've all heard as children. And I always have the students look at it page by page with me and raise their hand when they figure out what story it is. Which is kind of fun, because some people don't get it for a long time. And they're looking out their funds with their hands up going, what is it, what is it? So anyway, so.
It's also fun because it's tactile, so a lot of what we do is digital, of course, but with this activity, we bring in, foam shapes and scissors and all kinds of very tactile, fun materials.
So here are our students doing this, okay? These are graduate students, some of them are doctoral students, and this is not in their repertoire of things they've been asked to do in a long time. Just like you when I'm passing out pencils and paper, it's like, really, what? It's kind of fun, but they have a good time with it, and they end up putting them up on the bulletin board in one of the classrooms. We have people at the end of the semester ask for them back. They were so proud of themselves for what they created that they said, can we please have ours back? So what we asked them to do after seeing what Molly Bang created, and of course she is a psychologist and an artist, so she has very thorough explanations for what she's doing, what she's about in her text. We said, okay, it's your turn. You create in just 4 images or however many you have time to create another typical story we all know.
So we give them a link to fairy tales or fables, and we say to each group, keep it a secret. And then they present their story and see if people can guess. Because the main gist in the Molly Bang book is that shapes actually speak meaning. So, like a triangle, for example, is not as comforting as a circle. And it's sort of like a grammar of shapes. So it's really, it's fun to see the students work on this because some of them get very abstract, but others just can't leave behind making it actually look like, a little pig or, a witch's hat. And then they work through this idea of, well, can an abstract shape have meaning? And it really leads to some good discussions.
It's a really fun activity, but it also helps them see the kinds of things they could do with students. And of course, you could do this with technology tools as well. We just felt like something tactile might be a nice difference. All right. So, moving into more of the technology uses of this, we ask students to think about the fact, we call it, people always talk about pictures are worth 1,000 words, so we transfer that and said, a word's worth 1,000 pictures. Because in talking with teachers and with their students, a word isn't a concrete, one meaning thing. You can't all hear the same word and picture the same thing. If I said the word table to you, you might picture a table this size with black tablecloth on it. But you might picture a graphic. You might picture Table Mountain. I can't decide for you what that word means. So we ask students to select a word to define through pictures and to explore the word's various interpretations and not use text. So at the very end of each of the slide presentations that students made, they could add the word, but they couldn't put it anywhere else on the text. And we give them samples, of course, of everything that we do. I think we have the word. So you get the idea that the multiple meanings and the many ways that things can be presented.
It's one of their favorite assignments.
It is. And they are using tools that they're familiar with, but you might push them a little further by saying you have to add the music. You can't use something that has the word in it anywhere, so be cautious of your choices. We, of course, don't make them take all the pictures themselves, because that would be a real time-consuming activity, so they grab them, if you will, from places. And we provide links to where are some great picture sites that, so you don't be going to Google a million times and Google, images. But they do that too. So it's a simple technology process, but it's a much more complicated thing. Our example that we used was from a professional site that used the word fly to do it, and there's a lot of different ways that word is interpreted. So we really have had fun with this. It's really been interesting, and they like to keep them with how to use them in their master's portfolios as something they created. It's really been helpful. But it also gets them to think visually and to realize that words are no more concrete than images. We know images are not concrete. We don't all interpret the same thing from an image. So it's a practice with that they're getting to do. Okay. Now, more recently, because of the tools available to us free and on iPad apps and so forth, we've talked about how important comics and graphic novels are to visual understanding and how much young students all the way through high school and even into college, one of our keynoters is a dissertator who wrote a comic book for his dissertation. We know that comics are popular and that they convey meaning differently than words alone. So we talk a little bit about comics and we ask them to use an online comic creator to make an educational comic. And it can be just because it's motivating, put your directions for your next activity in a comic, put your concerns about something that's going on in your classroom in a comic. Ask the students to create a comic explaining the problem that they're having or a concern that they're having in the classroom, because it might be easier for them to express themselves through another character, all those kinds of things. There's lots of reasons to use comics. But this is a little bit trickier for them because these tools, of course, aren't as easy as some of the PowerPoint tools and that kind of thing.
And there's planning, like storyboarding involved.
So what you see here is that for everything, we give very thorough expectations and the assessment tool as well, and usually post several samples so that you can see the kinds of things other students have done. We make sure that they give credit to the visuals that they use if they haven't done this themselves. If they want to put sound with it, they can, and so forth and so on. So this one, for instance, is from one of the library media specialist students. And they love to give directions. So hers was on how to place a book on hold in the library. It's a real concrete graphic thing. It's not funny, it's just cute and it gets attention. Elizabeth and I did one on, an activity in class. It's just an interesting way for them to see that kids could do something meaningful to them with something as simple as a comic book tool. Want to add something?
No, just I noticed that a lot of the people who are teaching K-12 really like this assignment for their students, and they adopted a sort of a PSA, public service announcement approach, where they would have students pick an issue and then explain that issue, sort of like and they would make a class comic book out of that. So it was a very good collaborative activity too, and this tool is highly collaborative.
This was one that a Chinese student did, just explaining something about Chinese culture, and she teaches Chinese to American students, so it was just something she would use in class, actually. So you just get the idea that there's value to some of this stuff. All right, I've lost it. Elizabeth, I'm concerned. Oh, maybe.
I can't see your screen.
I know you
so
can't. Okay. Just couldn't find the icon. All right. So you get the idea about all the different kinds of things that we do. This is all in 15 weeks. So this is a course within educational technology, the program that we have at the university at the master's and doctoral level. And so one of the things we feel obliged to do is introduce new tools along with these new skills. We emphasize to all of our learners, however, that the tools change all the time. So this isn't a class in which we're going to give you lots of step-by-step instruction in a tool like a web creation tool where you really have to create a website and that's the whole purpose of the class. This is more learning about visual learning through these tools. So we give them tutorials, or we provide them a link to a professionally made tutorial, and we provide handouts and so forth.
And we give choices, so like if they have to make a photo story, we'll say, well, here are 3 we recommend, but feel free to go find another one if you wish.
Right. So, and oftentimes they'll say, well, I want to just do it in XYZ tool. And we say, well, we're reminding you that you're in educational technology and you might want to try new tools. But we also say the tools change all the time, so what we want you to practice is learning to learn these tools. Not learning this particular tool, but learning to learn them, because you're going to do that the rest of your life, probably. Okay, so tools change. Here are some of the tools that we're currently using. Readly, which is a free tool. You've seen it on the portfolio site already. You'll see it again. It can be free, and you can provide it to teachers free, and then they can give it to their students in sub-accounts for free. And it's a web creation tool so that people can make a portfolio and put it up on the web. They can blog and put it on the web and so forth and so on. And our students, once they see how easy it is, really enjoy using it for our class and for other classes as well. Gladister is a simple visualization tool. There's a free version and a low-cost educational version. We have them make posters as part of their final project, and we suggest that they can do that in Gladister, so it makes really easily well-designed visuals, adds a lot of different types of visuals that you can put in the same place. You can embed a video and everything. Pixton, you just saw examples of with the comics. This is one of the favorite tools once they learn it. And so sometimes it comes back to us in the final projects as well. And then Photo Peach for digital stories. We used other tools, but this is our new favorite and how they change over time. So this is just to give you an idea. We introduce a lot of different tools, but these are the types of tools that we introduce. And again, a lot of the activities we do could be done without a computer. There's a paper and pencil version of it, like I just passed out to you earlier. A lot of these were done prior to that. It's just so much easier when we have wonderful tools to create. You could ask kids to create a comic by drawing, but they feel like they don't have the skills to do that. So any questions so far?
What was the second program that you talked about?
The
What's the name of
second
it?
one on that list.
The visualization?
Glogster. G-L-O-G.
Will this presentation be available to people afterwards?
They're videotaping it, but I don't know about that. Nobody's told me there's a place for me to click through to it yet. If there is, well, I'll find out. They're supposed to be, I'm sure, yeah. Okay. All right. So as the students are working throughout the semester, this is an important part of their master's program with their master's students. They're building a portfolio of artifacts of things they've created, things that show that they've gained standards for meeting the professional standards in educational technology based on the ISTE standards and the state of Illinois standards for teachers, because many of them become certified as technology specialists, or school library media specialists. So we have our standards, we're meeting within the program as well. And because of that, we say for this class, we think you should make a visual portfolio. We want to make sure that you're collecting artifacts that we're having you create, and we want you to share them with one another. They learn a great deal from one another, seeing how someone else interpreted an assignment. So some of the things are done as groups, but many of them are done individually, especially now that we're virtual. So having a portfolio is an important way to showcase their learning, to have them archive their learning and have it available to them another time, because they're not, they change computers and they go, oh, I don't have that anymore, all those kinds of things. So we do work with that regularly. Let me see if I can just put that there. Things are up. So they make individual portfolios, and then we make one for the class. And this is what they look like the last time we did this. We haven't completed it for this semester yet. So each student is shown that they can archive their things, and they do it in a variety of ways. So they work on the dictionary, they work on other things, and they create their visual portfolios. And they showcase for us the things that they think they've done that are the best. So this is just an example of a couple of students, and you can see sort of the culmination of their work. This was an international student, and what she has here is her home page, her visual that she selected, a photograph of herself and who she is, and she's on top. And then a little bit about the 21st century literacies. And then in each of these, she has all of the things that we asked them to do during the semester, and her example of it, okay? So that you can see.
No, something's not showing up here on hers.
Okay. All the visual stories are showing up, that's right. Okay. Sorry.
Maybe try Ashley or Claire for that
Okay.
here.
Okay. So you can see the portfolios turn out looking very differently depending on who's doing it and what their design skills are and how interested they are in doing it.
So what program do they use to create that?
This is Weebly, one of the ones I suggested to you.
The teacher account is absolutely free, and it gives you 40 student accounts, and each student account has 10 websites, so you end up with 400 sites that you can use with students.
So I'm about 5 minutes away, so I'm going to go right ahead and talk about final projects. So students are busy all semester reading, doing online discussions. We have discussions every week. It's online, and even if it's a face-to-face class, we do discussions every week online. We use our tool all the time. They have resources to check out. They share resources with one another. The discussions are based on the activities that were assigned that week so that they can share what they did, what problems they had with it, but how they would use it with their own professional setting. So we have people that are everything from kindergarten teachers through college teachers, university teachers, as well as people who are instructional designers, trainers, facilitators, and library media people, and community studies people. So they might think of all kinds of ways to use it in their professional setting, and someone else will go, wow, I never thought of that. I've just barely gotten into this, and I had no idea you could do that. So on the Weebly site, they added their final project. And in the final project, our goal is not just to have them collect everything they've done, that's part of it, you see that they've done that, but to say, all right, we've worked with you all semester, you've practiced everything, you've encoded, you've decoded, you've looked at images, you've read psychology about what they have impact on people, you've looked at what people say about graphical information and concept mapping, a million topics. And we want you to tell us how you're going to embrace visual literacy by doing more with it in your professional setting. So your final project is to write a very short paper drawing upon the resources in the classes that is like a promise. It's a paper that says, when I can, my plan would be to do this. I'm going to change the way I work in this way. I'm going to add this, I'm going to develop a unit in this, I'm going to ask for help and manage to do this. We have no goal for you that's specific, like you must do this and you must do that. Come up with a way that you are thinking that you could physically make the time to do it, you would enjoy it, and you think it would meet your learners' needs. We've told you what the learners' needs might be, now what will you do with that? And we say it's not a project that you're gonna complete in this class and you're gonna end up doing it. We know that because they've already kept you very busy all semester. So we're gonna ask you to write a short paper explaining it, and then create a poster that promotes your idea. That's where Gloucester comes in, what the idea might be. And an artifact. Add one thing that if you were going to do this, what would you need? Would you need an outline of the whole unit because you created a workshop for teachers? Or do you need something to do for assessment because it's new to you to have this creation of something visual and you don't know how you're going to assess, so you're going to create an assessment tool? Or maybe you just want to create directions for a new activity that you're going to add to a unit that's already created, and you're adding one new activity that involves visual literacy for your group of students. Doesn't matter, we let them pick, all right? And we've got everything you can imagine as possibilities for what people do, because they teach so many different areas, because there's so many different kinds of students in the classroom. So they learn a lot from each other in what they're going to do. Is there a final project in this group that we were going to highlight?
The Anne Frank one was very good. Are you on the sample projects page?
No. Sorry, I lost that. I'm sorry, it's really hard to see up here.
That's okay. I did take some screen captures, so you
I
can.
just have to go back to it. That's okay.
All right.
Come on. No project there. Let's see. Slow the train.
Some of them are pretty impressive, like that multimedia timeline. You know, that was a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. we did that. Really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see from the names of these that they did sample things based on their grade level. 8th grade social studies, 7th grade language arts, a multimedia timeline. It's done in Prezi, and it was very involved. But what he was doing was the timeline of all the public media that was released while we were having Occupy, was doing different things around the country. And so he wanted to create a timeline of that. It's very, very good. But he wasn't a teacher, so that would be an interesting thing to do. College level science class project.
That's where she had them make I think a digital story about a chemical,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, that was a very good one too.
So-
The Diary of Anne Frank one, she used that tool called Kaku, and this is an example where a student introduced us to a tool. This is a collaborative tool where students can diagram with math and create presentations together in real time.
That's the one she just talked about.
It's towards the bottom.
I found it. It's loading. We're just
Yeah,
about,
it's
we're just
very
about out of
visual,
time, yeah, okay. So, and I'm getting the paper, which is of course not what I wanted.
It would be sample diagram, maybe.
Okay, I put down the wrong thing, I'm sorry. Sorry.
And then she also gave a zip file with like her grading criteria and instructions. She made a lot of artifacts. We don't require that many, but this student was going to implement this project right away.
And many of them do, they get excited enough about it and they think about how this might add to their reading standards and interest in their class and all kinds of stuff. This is gonna load kind of slowly. The two other, while it's loading, I'll just say, the other two things that we want to talk about, because we have like no minutes left, 5 minutes at the most, is that the two things that we build the class around beside all the rest of this is collaboration and reflection. So students are encouraged to do their final projects in collaboration with others. So if there's more than one middle elementary or middle school or high school science teacher, we say, why don't you work together? You can multiply what you can produce and have something to toss your ideas back and forth with. And that idea is well received, a little less easy to do in the virtual class. But we have several groups in our virtual class this semester that are working together virtually within our tool to create stuff. A lot of them, since they're school library media specialists, will be working on things that they're going to do around literature and genre, combining fiction and nonfiction, that kind of thing. So they'll say, well, this will just be for middle school, and then all the middle school teachers can work on that project together. And it's very nice because they learn a lot from each other. But you also see collaboration in the discussions every week. There's a lot of sharing and a lot of guiding and a lot of praise given to people for their efforts and stuff from back and forth in class. So it really feels like a community for us. We're very excited about that aspect of it. And then with Elizabeth's guidance from the study she had done, we added reflection, regular reflection every week to the class. Every time an activity was done, we asked them to reflect on their learning. And at the end of the semester, we asked them to reflect on their learning overall. And it's important to us because there's a little bit of resistance. You might have been able to tell that in my introduction. There's sometimes a little bit of resistance to this topic and to how much the technology it is and how much that has to happen all the time, and it's a lot of new stuff. And by the end of the semester, you get people reflecting continually, I learned so much. I'm so proud of myself. I really see I can do some of these things with my learners. So you feel like we've really helped them see that this is possible for themselves and that they'll take that final project idea and move forward with it and be much less afraid of something new like visual literacy, media literacy, digital literacy. So this is just a poster that the Anne Frank project made. Did you want to talk a little bit about it, Finally Loaded?
Oh, so like one of the, let me see, I probably lost it now. One of her artifacts is a worksheet she gives to the students after they create their diagram. And some of the questions in it asks them to reflect on the visual design. So like one question is, what specific elements of visual design did you and your partner attempt to incorporate into your summary, and how did you accomplish this? So she's already translated this importance of understanding the visual literacy elements to these middle school students. She asks them, what do you feel are the strongest parts of your diagram? So the students are self-reflecting, self-assessing, and using the correct vocabulary to understand an expanded view of literacy.
It's really slow. So that's sort of the course in brief.
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
collaborative?
Please.
I'm sure a lot of teachers that are in the room have run into issues with collaborative pieces where they don't evenly carry their weight.
We do. We want to
How do you
that.
handle that with a student that does not?
In this case, the groups are formed. They can write one paper together, so they can draw which readings we want to draw upon, what's behind what we're doing. They can work on that together, but they each do an artifact of their own, and they work together on the poster. Does it turn out that sometimes one person does the poster, and one person does the artifact, and one person writes the paper? I imagine, but they've had to discuss it to know what they're all doing. So
They
that's about.
discuss it on a discussion board so we can track it, and no one can sort of just slack and hide.
Yeah, they do it.
So
Remember
their
that.
comments are all individual and board.
Right. And they tell on each other anyway.
No,
They
that
complain.
they do.
Okay, they really do. So I
We
think
haven't
that's,
had a big problem
we
with that
haven't.
because
They're
we're
hard
very
workers.
invested in projects.
they're very hard workers. But the discussion board is part of the collaboration, it's been extremely rich. And then the reflections really add that component to have students see that they've mastered something, to be able to say to themselves, now that I look back, I see my reflections each week and I go, wow, I went from, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I don't know why I'm in this class, to, wow, I'm going to do this with my students.
And the reflections take pressure off them, so many of our activities are very low stakes. In other words, it's sort of, okay, here's a brand new tool and a brand new concept of visual literacy. We want you to explore it. But if your item doesn't turn out great, that's okay. You can explain your learning in the reflection, and that's where the major points are.
So we call it high energy, high impact, low stakes, as far as all the productions are concerned. We're not grading them as design projects.
It takes the fear out of it.
So you got to see some examples of the final projects that create an artifact and a poster. We do a poster, like a conference poster show, the last night of class. We actually have a live class, and they come in and half and half look at everybody's stuff. They have handouts for each other. So they learn a lot, and they can take those ideas back and say, that's great. Plus, they're posted on the Weekly, so they can take a look at them later. So,
we keep their portfolios up forever, so
yeah,
they can
these are
always go back to it.
available forever, and they put them in the, we use LiveText as a repository for students' work, so they can also put it on LiveText. All right, we have no minutes, but if you'd like to ask a question, we're here to answer them. Yes, ma'am?
Aside from technology, what are your students most hesitant about or concerned about when, playing with the idea that they have to learn about visual literacy? What at the beginning of the course, what are they most anxious
Well,
about?
that whole idea that they're afraid they're going to have to learn to be creative in a way they haven't ever been challenged to be. And the minute you start talking about creativity, and I'm gonna judge you on your drawing and her on her drawing, you get people going, I can't draw. We're not gonna make you draw, that's okay. And we're not gonna grade you on your drawing, you're gonna try it. So, but I think there's this fear of, I don't wanna do that. We had a group of teachers we worked with, and we said, we'll teach the visual elements to your students, and you can, we'll co-teach. You come in the room with us, we'll work on it together, and then you can do it next time. We got all done, I did a story showing you all the different ways that the stories have been illustrated in storybooks, talked about the, have the line, shape, color, all of that stuff. And at the end of it, one of the teachers turned to the other teacher and said, better her than me. They just don't want to, it's hard. They don't understand it. It's like they didn't have a basic design class in school, or they didn't have an art class. It's strange. But combining that with technology is the devil. That makes it.
I know you had mentioned Prezi, and I don't know how many educators are in here, but I use Prezi with my 8th graders, and they get more excited for notes than they do anything else. Because you can embed videos right on there, and it's just another great source that I know you had briefly mentioned, but it's just a visual tour of notes instead of just a PowerPoint. And I know whenever I say, hey, we're going to take notes, is that a Prezi? Like, no, sorry, but next time it will be. So that's another great source that you had mentioned, and I just wanted to highlight
We haven't
that.
been using it this semester, which is why it's not here, but yes, it is a great tool, and students do love it. Thank you.
Now, the layout and format you have for your presentation, like it's in a gallery.
Yes, I did that because we were here.
Right, no, I know, but is that just like an option in what?
It's an application, it's called eMaze.
eMaze? Okay.
Elizabeth found it, of course. She teaches undergraduates, they get bored quickly, so you keep that. Other questions? So we'll probably be able to share this with you, however it is being manipulated. Nobody's told me that yet, but we'll find it, whatever it is. We've been asked to share materials, so we'll certainly be doing that. I'll recommend you to this book. It's being edited by Toledo, who was a doctoral grad in my program, and one of my students who took my visual literacy class. And it has about 15 chapters full of great ideas on ways to increase visual literacy and media literacy with students. And it addresses the ACLL guidelines as well, so it looks at librarian information literacy and so forth. And I wish I had a preview copy, but I do not. But anyway, if there's anything else, I'll encourage you, those of you I haven't seen most of you ever before, if you want to consider becoming members of IVLA and joining what we do and sharing your good ideas at another conference, we would love to have you as members. You can join at the registration desk if you get excited about the idea. And I'll encourage you to do whatever you can to take all of these good ideas that you have and our good ideas and move forward with helping our society become better visually. Okay, thank you so much.